Good evening and thanks for joining us for our Remembrance Day cast, where we will be showcasing all the ceremonies being held around the city. Our coverage begins with the ceremony at Fort William Gardens, which saw veterans, military personnel, and community members come out to honor those who put their lives on the line for their country. Jessica Clement has more.
The annual Remembrance Day ceremony at Fort William Gardens gave residents the chance to pay tribute to those who put their lives on the line for Canada. Around 2,000 people came out for the ceremony, with many community members and groups coming up to lay a wreath in honor of the thousands of Canadians who served and sacrificed in armed conflicts. This year's ceremony was attended by Elmer Auld, who is believed to be one of the last World War II veterans in Thunder Bay. He served in the Canadian Navy during the Battle of the Atlantic and says, like every year, he's thinking about his friends and fellow Navy sailors who never made it home.
What I always think about, I see all my friends in some of the ships that got torpedoed. I was in the water for an hour when the HMCS Valleyfield went down. They tied a rope around us and put us over the side trying to pull the guys out of the water. You never forget it. Another one, too, is HMCS Sheboygan. Another one got torpedoed. Think of all the ships that were sunk during the Second World War. It's terrible.
Auld participated in the passing of the torch ceremony, where he handed the torch to Private Caitlin Bueller of the Thunder Bay Army Reserves.
It was such an honor to have that Passover, and especially to represent the reserves here as a whole, and just the whole ceremony is just really meaningful, and especially to the past and everything, continuing just the whole meaning of it. It's really important, so I feel really honored to do this. Just thinking about everyone in the past who has served and the sacrifice they made, country they made for us, it's all so important, and I'm just here to honor them and continue that, keep that with us.
This year's keynote speaker was Mayor Jim Payne of Superior, Wisconsin, who was a veteran in the U.S. military. He described Remembrance as a year-long calling and not just a one-day occasion. Local Navy veteran Roy L'Esperance said the message really resonated with him.
Not just one day. One day just didn't do everything. It was a matter of a whole 5 days. And to me, we should be remembering all the time.
Jessica Clement, TBT News.
With more on our Remembrance Day coverage, there was another powerful ceremony held at Waverly Park. Hundreds gathered there to watch the wreaths laid at the cenotaph in honor of those who fought for our freedom. Celios Bellos reports.
The annual gathering at Waverly Park recognized all the people who sacrificed so much to make our nation what it is today. Hundreds were at Waverly Park for this year's Remembrance Day ceremony in honor of those who gave everything to ensure the freedoms we as Canadians hold dear. The event saw various groups make the powerful walk to the cenotaph to lay a wreath in honor of our veterans.
Remember all of what the veterans, the soldiers, Navy, and Air Force did for us.
George Romick is with the Port Arthur branch of the Royal Canadian Legion and says the incredible yearly turnout means so much to those who served, while helping to ensure history doesn't repeat itself.
We need to keep everybody educated about the conflicts of World War I, World War II, Korea, peacekeeping, Afghanistan, so that we hope that this never happens again. We're always praying that this never happens. Unfortunately, it does happen, but we need to remember the veterans of all those wars and conflicts that gave us the freedom to do what we can in Canada.
The event featured a number of groups marching through Waverly Park, including some local cadets.
Once we're done with our jobs at the Legion, somebody has to take over, so they have to understand the what's and the whys.
Port Arthur Branch 5 President Katrina Millema says seeing young people involved is a great way for them to understand the importance of remembering our veterans. Millema reminds the community that while many think back to the First and Second World Wars on this day, Canadian soldiers have been fighting for our freedoms ever since.
We've had people who lost their lives in Afghanistan, and they were young. So it's not just the First and Second World War. We've lost people in other conflicts, and so I think we need to just remember that there are people that are signing up and going out to make sure that the freedoms that we have are ongoing.
While Thunder Bay has once again come out in full force to show its support this Remembrance Day, those efforts can extend year-round, with local legions always accepting donations to help support those who fought for our nation. Vasilios Bellos, TVT News.
Continuing our coverage, we head to Fort William First Nation, where their ceremony for Remembrance Day was held on Anemkiwaju, also known as Mount McKay, for their annual November 11th ceremony. Over 150 people made their way up Anemkiwaju, including active servicemen, veterans, counselors, and community members to pay their respects to those who made the ultimate sacrifice. There was a drum ceremony, moment of silence, followed with a wreath laying as attendees remembered fallen veterans, particularly those of Indigenous background. The ceremony has been here since 1994, thanks to Catherine Banning and her late father, Private Frank Banning, to deal with his post-traumatic stress from serving in World War II.
It's heartwarming and my privilege to be here to represent my father and to represent the Banning family. We have been working on this for a number of years, and it was really medicinal for my dad to have the Remembrance Day service. It helped him deal with his PTSD, and it helped him remember all of the comrades that he was with overseas, some of them his best friends.
And wrapping up our local Remembrance Day coverage, we head to the Slovak Legion, where against the backdrop of the historic venue, the ceremony stood as a tribute, uniting those in attendance and sharing a commitment to never forget. The Slovak Legion has a deep history involving veterans, as in 1936, veterans of the First Great War of Slovak descent who served with the Allies banded together and decided to form a branch of their own with the Canadian Legion, becoming well known throughout the community for their charitable and service work as they continue to be an integral part of the city of Thunder Bay. Today, dozens of residents came out to pay respect to those lost. The day saw the military parade and entry of the color party, act of remembrance, the last post, and a wreath laying. Slovak President Viktor Renov wore a special handmade poppy given to him by a child, which gave him hope that even the younger generation will continue to remember.
It's a beautiful little remembrance, and I could have hugged the little guy, and yeah, I got grandchildren and great-grandchildren myself, and to have it sink into, at least you catch a couple that are going to carry on the message, and because one day we're going to need them.
And while that wraps up our local Remembrance Day coverage, ceremonies were held across Canada today to honor those who have served. In the nation's capital, the National War Memorial was front and center as the nation marked the occasion. Jeremy Sharon has more.
A day to remember and reflect. Thousands gathered on a cold Saturday in the capital, filling the streets around the National War Memorial on this Remembrance Day. Pausing to honor those who have served.
We remember those who answered when their country called, those who fought, and those who died for something greater than themselves.
Gathered here, Canadians from coast to coast. Proud parents.
Came from California to watch our son, who is he's a first-year student at the Royal Military College in Kingston. He got selected to march in the Remembrance Day parade here today.
Family members honoring loved ones they've lost.
He was the greatest father I've ever known. He was my hero, and that's the way it goes. You honor the people that brought you up.
Veterans with special stories and connections to this important day.
My wife passed away last year, and we had planned to come to this one this year, so it was completing fulfillment in what she had requested.
And young kids inspired by past generations.
I thought it was important to remember the people who sacrificed themselves for our country.
This year's Silver Cross mother, Gloria Hooper, her son died in Bosnia when he was 22 years old. She laid a wreath at the cenotaph on behalf of all families who have lost a child serving for Canada. Today, dedicated to those who fought for peace, but it comes at a time when war rages on in the Middle East and in Ukraine.
It's an opportunity to reflect on past wars, reflect on those who we knew, but also reflect on the future and the challenges that our world and our country and armed forces are facing.
Jeremy Sharon, CTV News, Ottawa.
We're now joined by sports anchor Joe Sadowski, and while we're heading to the LU basketball game tonight, last night, a pair of games that you were at, and some wins, some losses.
Yeah, definitely. It was unbelievable basketball, but dude, the atmosphere in the Thunderdome is phenomenal. I can't wait to see you guys there later tonight. We'll have the highlights from last night and more coming up after the break.